Hey everybody, Jay Weidner here. Reality check. Thanks for watching. Hit like and subscribe and all that jazz and help me out get more subscribers. Before we begin tonight, I want to thank Michelle Hood at Light the Light Pyramids. That's Light, L-I-T-E, the Light, L-I-G-H-T, pyramids.com for sending me some really cool orgone receptors. Look at all those BBs. And these are quite beautiful. And you can go to her website, and she sells these incredible pyramids with all sorts of nifty stones in them. And I just want to thank you, Michelle, because I know why you sent those, and they really help. I really, really appreciate it. So tonight we're going to, no further ado, we're going to cut to the chase. We got Diamond from Oppenheimer Ranch Project. He's been on here before. He's a radical geologist and paleontologist, and comes to my town once a year and causes all the liberals in my town to get all upset. So it's really kind of fun. And he speaks at our energy fair, and he tells everybody a whole bunch of truths that sometimes fall on ears that don't want to hear. But anyway, how you doing, Diamond?
I'm doing awesome, and it's a pleasure to be on your show. Thanks for asking me. And the introduction was stellar. I never heard it spoken so well, and I often, well, the first time they invited me 3 years ago, Jay, I was like, I called them back and I said, "You know who I am, right? I mean, are you sure you want me to come there?"
Yeah, I was really surprised that they had the cojones to invite you, and they're still, and you're still coming. I don't know if you're coming next year, but I hope you do. Because your talks are really fun because of the truth that you drop on everybody. But tonight I want to do a couple things before I get into cycles and your evolutionary theories and all that. I want to start out here with a little bit of a debunking. Since you're a geologist and a paleontologist, it's fun to have somebody on who can talk from a scientific point of view about certain trends that are going on the internet that I find kind of troubling. And so I want to start this out because I'm going somewhere with this. But in your point, in your view as a geologist, is there a significant way to realize the difference between petrified wood and a regular rock?
Well, absolutely. And petrified wood is one of the most excellent examples of something geologists call silicification, where an actual organic thing, like in this case, a tree or a plant, the entire creature or the entire tree or plant gets replaced atom by atom with silica. And what you get left with is, well, sometimes it looks like a tree, but sometimes it just looks like a piece of quartz that's stretched out a little if you get a fragment. But if you cut that in thin section and do petrography on it, which means looking at it under a microscope, and looking at the minerals in it, what you're going to see is an amazing preservation of the original product. What I mean is that all the plant cells are still present. You can see cell walls and the phylum and all that stuff that was in the tree. So it's very easy to tell the difference between just a piece of quartz that may look like petrified wood and petrified wood itself, but to do the analysis, you'd have to cut it and look at it in thin section. It's not a very expensive thing to do. If you have your own equipment, it just takes a diamond saw and some time. We actually, as scientists, are milling these slides down on these stones with our hand for hours to get them to the right thickness. And we just throw them in a microscope and we can tell you, boom, immediately if it was a tree or what kind of tree, what species, etc. So it's very easy to tell the difference.
So there are petrified animals. Is there such a thing as?
Yeah, there's, I guess you could call them petrified animals. There are some animals that are silicified and some of them that are even opalized. A lot of these are ocean animals. A lot of people know that you can buy opalized shells on the open market, but true petrification, if you go by the example, only happens on land. And this is when you get land animals and plants that fall down in a flood environment and gets completely buried anoxically. This is the idea. that they get buried in an environment so rapidly that there's no chance for it to rot. So it's completely preserved in this sarcophagus with no oxygen. And over long processes, atom by atom, that material gets changed from organic to inorganic in the form of silicification, and that's what you get. And this could happen to animals, but it's highly unlikely because animals are covered in bacteria just like plants. And the difference is that a lot of plants, like trees, don't have a lot of bacteria inside them. It's just on the bark, Jay. So the bark is the only thing that really rots. The biology has not much more, and then you get silicified wood. Whereas an animal like an insect or a mammal, like a mouse that would get covered, they have, you know, that what's in our gut, it's gut bacteria, and our entire body is filled with bacteria. And so typically an animal gets eaten alive, even in an anoxic environment, and you get left with a pocket. You get left with just a chunk of something that replaces it that doesn't look like the original. It's very hard to tell what it is. Now, but what you do get left with in these silicified environments is DNA. So if you were to sample the mud that the tree was in, what you could get out of there is the entire ecosystem from that region, because all of the animals are shedding cells. I don't know if you know that you shed 40,000 cells like a minute. So Jay, you are all over your apartment.
Oh yeah, I know that. And they've done DNA studies on that and proved it. So let's get to the first debunk. There's these people on the internet, and they've been around for about 3 irritating years now. And they're putting out these videos where they'll show a rock that looks like an ear, right? But it's clearly a rock, or a rock that looks like a liver, or a rock that looks like a lung. And then they're claiming that this is petrified human remains. And I was wondering how you would respond to that.
Well, I think I know who you're talking about. And the whole concept is extremely unscientific from the beginning. And it just goes back when you just start listening to some of it. Almost anyone that's a critical thinker will go back to their childhood, looking up in the clouds and seeing things up there. You know, you can see anything you want if you stare long enough. But there's actually a phenomenon in geology and rock hounding called a geo-fact. And geo-facts are things that we find, the uneducated finder finds that they misrepresent. And the most common geo-fact is a triangular piece of shale that someone thinks is an arrowhead. And this has to do with archaeology. So a lot of people pick up triangular rocks and they think they're arrowheads, but only someone that knows about napping and rock types, or the types of stone tools in that region can actually identify or not if it's real or not. But even the amateur archaeologist knows the difference between a tiny shard. Like you and I could probably go out in the field. I could pick up a flake that's 2 millimeters wide of, let's say, a flint, and show it to you and say, this is an artifact. And you would know that it's an artifact, correct, Jay?
No, I wouldn't.
Oh, okay. I thought you were a collector, but many people can. So it's based on experience, first of all, and scientific knowledge. Now, the people that are claiming that things are shaped like an ear is an ear, this is complete fantasy for a number of reasons, because most of these rocks are being found out of place. So first of all, there's no context to where they're weathering out. The only way to actually do geology is to find the actual outcrop in situ, meaning it's freshly sticking out of the earth. Even if it's sticking out and it's a 200 million year outcrop, it's still the fresh rock, like a quarry cut. And then we can go into that rock and start pulling out things and say that they're from this time frame and potentially fossils. But something that's shaped like an ear or a human, and sometimes they pan out into whole mountains and say it's a dragon. It's just based on no science, because typically on the larger scale objects like the dragons from space, what they're looking at is hundreds of thousands of years of sedimentary rock piled on top of each other. That if you go down and look at the small scale, can easily be debunked as separate units, because you can see the cosmic catastrophe cycles within it. And then the smaller objects they pull out, let's take, for example, I just did an interview with Mud Fossil University, and I think that's who you're talking about, where he had 2 examples of what he were claiming were lungs. Well, first of all, he went out on a tangent on the first lung, that it was bleeding on the table and there was no blood present, and it was an act. And the other piece he had up was a piece of apolitic granite or West Coast granite. And so a limestone lung and a granite lung, first of all, that makes no sense at all. And anyone that knows anything about rocks would be like, well, there's no such thing as a granite fossil, because these are magmas that cool under the earth and the surface. So it's just like there's nowhere to begin with debunking the idea. It's almost embarrassing to have to explain to someone that it's not real, in my opinion.
I agree. All right, so let's move on then. Devil's Tower is a tree stump.
Yeah, well, there are probably over 100 peer-reviewed studies on a phenomenon called columnar jointing. And this is when you get basaltic, which are these are basaltic lavas. They're a specific kind, just like in Hawaii. They're very low in silica. A high silica lava would be Mount St. Helens, explosive. But the basaltic lavas flow out on the ground very slow. We saw it in La Palma. We see it in Hawaii. If these basalts get so thick, and we'll see it in La Palma in about 1,000 years, when those lavas cool over the next 100 years at La Palma, the ones that are 30 meters thick, the outer shell will crack off, and the weathering pattern inside will be this polygonal jointed columns. And it has to do with the crystal structure of the lava, and it has to do with the cooling pattern and then the fracture pattern. And what we see in something like Devil's Tower is the ancient volcanic neck of a volcano that's now missing. And this is not the only place we see this. We see it all over the world. So it's not something that's a conspiracy or something that really needs to be argued. It's pretty certain. And I would say, geologically speaking, we're about 90 to 95% certain that this type of basalt with columnar jointing was from deep in the earth and has now been exposed on the surface. It's all over Washington State. It's called the Columbia River basalts and things like that. You could see this jointing for miles in every direction. So it's not new.
All right. 2 debunks. That's good. All right. Last debunk. As a geologist, what would you say is the best evidence to prove that we're living on a sphere?
Well, the original evidence that comes from Egypt, when a man with a stick measured the height of a shadow, and at the same time, in a different latitude, someone was doing the same thing, and they compared notes. And when you do that, you can determine the arc based on the shadow alone. So that was the first actual scientific evidence to prove that there was curvature. But just the fact that the most ancient science, which we call astrology, has been going on, and that ancient people, maybe as far back as hundreds of thousands of years ago, started noticing a wobble on our planet called the precession of the equinoxes. Now, this phenomenon can only occur in a spherical world with spinning bodies in a universe like we all believe in, that it's probably not a big bag universe, an infinite one, but there are certain dynamic systems that are magnetic that cause spinning. And when we look out into the universe as well, as early as Galileo, he could see circular objects, the planets, the moons. We could visually witness these. So the fact that now we have high resolution telescopes and that we can witness millions and billions of circular objects, circles, it's probably not flat, Jay.
Yeah, like almost everything in the universe is spherical. So anyway, we wasted enough time on internet nonsense. Let's get down to the real stuff. So you were on Rex's show, and you're talking about this 26,000 year cycle. Can you get into that for a little bit here?
Well, it's really interesting that catastrophism is now back on, is really high on the list of talking points in science. Catastrophism was basically erased in the early 1800s. There were 2 schools of thought, catastrophism and uniformitarianism. And the one won, and that's what we're taught, uniformitarianism, that the only way to do any science, earth science, is to look at the earth now and to witness what's going on now and then to relate it to the past. The problem with that is, in the past, we now know through ice core data, there was a lot of crazy stuff going on. We're talking about shit hit the fan stuff, and it was happening in a cyclic pattern. Now, what the ice core data gave us, and I'm talking about some of the first Greenland cores and then the Antarctic cores. So we have Vostok data. We have now data from about 4 points on Earth that go back at least 3 or 4 million years. And this isn't just one ice core that they dug. This took over a decade, and they were matching up different places where the ice connected and there was deeper ice. So they were moving laterally to get the full picture. And what they came up with is a pretty high resolution, 500,000 years of data. And that showed this 110,000 year cycle of complete destruction on Earth. And so, and humans were alive during this whole ice core. So if we know that humans have been alive for 500,000 years, let's just throw that out. Everyone will accept that, except the Bible people, because Earth is only 7,000 years old. But if we've been alive for 500,000 years, we have experienced 4 of the largest mass extinctions ever in human history. And the last one just happened 12,900 years ago. That was the beginning, and it ended at 11,500 years ago. And that happened 110,000 years before that. And then 110,000 years before that, it happened again. So we have a major driving cycle about 110,000 years that causes a huge majority of all life on Earth to be in critical condition. And then after the event, we have a whole new bunch of species running around. Now, the cosmic clock is a 26,000 year cycle. So where does that come into play? Well, I'll tell you what, Jay, I had no idea. When I was at university, I was looking at the rocks. I'm a stratigrapher and a paleontologist, so we have to go look at the sedimentary rocks layer by layer and look at the fossils and the animals. And the people I was studying under had uncovered a 25,000 year cycle. They thought it was 20,000. It was all up in the air, but they had never connected the Yuga cycle, the precession of the equinoxes. The 26,000 year cycle that has been talking about time immemorial in all cultures from east to west around the globe. We're talking pagan societies, all types of ancient information, the secret schools. You can go anywhere, India, China, the native cultures, and they all talk about this cycle. So what is the cycle? Well, when I'm studying as a geologist, this is the cycle that lays down rocks on Earth. There is no other cycle except 26,000 year cycle in the sedimentary record. And if you go back all the way to the Cambrian, which is 600 million years ago, all the way to the present now, and look in every quarry, everywhere in the world, you can see this clock going boom, boom, boom. But the important thing is that every 4 or 5 of these cycles, everything changes. And that's the 110,000 year cycle. That is the main cycle, not the 26,000 year cycle. The 110,000 year cycle currently is the big boom. Now, whatever is controlling that is anyone's guess. Back when I was studying it, we determined it was the eccentricity of the orbit based on Milutin Milankovitch's orbital perturbations, the work he did in the 40s. But since then, there's a lot of speculation, and none of this may really be effective, geo-effective. What I mean by that is these little wobbles that are happening on the Earth is not that geo-effective in causing a climate catastrophe or any catastrophe, so to speak, because every year the Earth wobbles. It's called the seasons, and we lean towards the sun and away. So why isn't there a catastrophe every year? There isn't. So there's definitely something else at play that's keeping this harmonic. And let's come back to that because I think it has to do with a harmonic. The harmonic was created a very long time ago, let's say 1 billion years ago, and it's still going. So the harmonic was created on the planet from an external source, maybe the galactic center, through this galactic wave, and subsequently now we're wobbling in this pattern of the harmonic. So they think when scientists originally studied it, that the harmonic was causing it, but no, that's just a side effect of the catastrophe. Are you up to speed so far?
Yeah, it's interesting because in Hebrew alchemy, 26 is the number of God. In the Mayan calendar, 260 is the number of days that their calendar is. And that's also how long it takes from conception to giving birth is 260 days. And of course, these are all harmonics of 26,000. So these, even the ancient societies seem to have built in this math into their belief systems. So it's pretty amazing.
Yeah.
Plus, of course, the 12 signs of the zodiac. And then, of course, the center of the galaxy is 26,000 light years away, right?
Yeah. So all these coincidences, let's say, Jay, and all these disjunct sciences now coming together as one. So the way it all began was Randall Carlson, almost a little over a decade ago. He's into the mystery schools. He's into sacred geometry. He was one of the first people teaching on it in a large scale. And people started to, yeah. And he's also a geologist. He's an architect, but he's also a geologist, in my opinion. And what he said is, let me go out and find all the geologic catastrophes have to do with the Ice Age, and let me put them on a map of sorts. And because he works in sacred geometry, he picked the Iron Cross, because the Iron Cross has everything to do with astrology, as it has to do with the Knights Templar, as it has to do with the religion of Christianity. The cross, which comes, when I study all ancient sites here in the Southwest, we see something called the medicine wheel. The medicine wheel is nothing more than the cosmic cross. It is the Celtic cross. It is the Ankh. It is everything that has a cross in it. This is that's exactly what we're talking about. And you can include astrology on this cross. Now, what Randall did was he started overlaying the major catastrophes in the Ice Age, which include two things: either the onset of an ice age, where all of a sudden it's warm and then everyone dies because it gets cold. And the last time that happened was exactly 26,000 years ago, on the same flexure point we're living on today. And that was the onset of the late Wisconsinian down in the bottom of the flexure point. And so based on this whole study, we are now living the next onset of an ice age today. And he laid on Heinrich events, which is the breakdown of ice ages, as well as the onset of ice ages, including the Greenland Blitz. And all of these catastrophes fall on flexure points on the Iron Cross on this wheel. Now, a 2 or 3 might be a coincidence, but every single one that we can date going back 160,000 years, and there may be more. This was created a decade ago, and not a single scientist has come out to debunk this. That's what I find fascinating.
No, I agree with you completely. Just want to show everybody, this is the cover of my book, and my book is all about this, how this cross in the south of France was telling us all about this. So let's get back to this. All right.
Yeah, what book is that, Jay?
The Mysteries of the Great Cross of Hyndee. And I don't know if, is it on the screen? I don't think it is.
No, but I don't see it. But no. I did some research a little bit earlier, and I found that book with your name under it, and I was like, wow, did Jay write that book?
Yep. It's pretty much one of the most difficult esoteric books ever to read, so I don't blame anyone for having trouble with it. We tried to put a lot into it because we were never sure if we were ever going to get published again. So, but yeah, that's what actually Randall and I were paralleling each other the whole time, going to Hyndee, France at the same time. We didn't know each other. We were tracing down the same exact research at the same exact time. And then when my book came out, he like wrote me and goes, "Oh my God, we've been doing the same thing." And I'm like, wow, that's really cool. And then I started watching his lectures on YouTube, and I was like, oh. And then I got to meet him. And Randall, I'm going to have Randall on here soon, again, to talk about all this, because this is great stuff. All right, so where are we now in this cycle?
Well, if from my experience as a geologist and looking at the stratigraphy, we are on the sea level fall surface. Every 26,000 years, you can find a sedimentary package of rock that contains two parts. And this is just mind blowing. That I looked at hundreds of thousands of catastrophe cycles, and we're trying to find the mechanism. And that 20 years later, when I'm retiring and I'm now a blogger on scam science, that it's all coming together, because the whole point is a multidisciplinary approach. There's no way that you can come to a conclusion if you're compartmentalized in your wing. They literally separated the chemistry department from the physics department and the geology department in 1990, where we could no longer talk to each other. You had to take an elevator. It made no sense. I'm like, I need to talk to the chemistry guys all day, because I don't know the chemistry that they know, but I know what I'm seeing and I need an answer, So now it's all coming together, and it all has to do, Jay, with vibration. It all has to do with astrology, the old ancient sciences, and the fact that the ancients have been trying to tell this to us time immemorial, and they've encoded it into the buildings. The precession of the equinoxes has been encoded all over the world in megalithic structures. I don't need to do videos on them. There's hundreds of thousands of videos on these topics. And it just seems like that very few people are listening. But we are on the sea level surface. It's not a big one. The big one just happened, and that's the sea level rise surface. So the 12,900 year event was the big event, and that's over. The next biggest event like that is not for 83,000 years. Thank God, based on everything we've seen in the rock record. But we are on a catastrophe that all of civilization will collapse. It's the sea level fall surface. The sea level typically falls 80 to 200 feet on the initial drop. And in order to do that, you either need to vaporize water off of the earth, or you need to build some really big glaciers really quick. And I think both happen. I think that there's a solar outburst, which immediately shuts down all of the quiescent systems that have been working for 12,000 years that we all come to know and love. And this happens as the magnetosphere weakens. As the magnetosphere of Earth weakens, everything can be reset. And if it causes the actual rotational pole to shift, that's a possibility, but it would only be brief and go back, because there's no evidence that the pole hasn't been in the north where it is forever and ever. Yeah, so the rotational pole has always pretty much been the same, except for the wobble. But what could happen is the crust could slip, because our crust is only connected through electrodynamics to what is called the asthenosphere. This is a region of the Earth down 180 kilometers where it could act as liquid. This is the most bizarre thing that you need to learn as a geologist, that region of Earth is called the plastic zone. And that's bad news, because that means they don't know shit about it. So in this small region of about 50 kilometers, it's not liquid, but it's plastic. And we all know what happens when people become plastic, Jay. It's a bad deal. So what could literally happen in this zone is if the magnetic connection where the crust is stuck to the earth loosens, that could slip around a bit. But I think it should snap back quite rapidly, because there's no evidence of long-term slippage. There's only evidence of short-term blips. So the good news is it's a short-term blip. The sea level is going to fall. We're entering an ice age. The shit's going to hit the fan, but it takes about 1,500 years. It takes 1,500 years to get to the end of it, and no one's going to live through the whole thing. We're only living through the very beginning, and most lifetimes won't notice anything, except for Let's Go Brandon.
Yeah. Well, my producer, who lives in India, called me today and complained about how cold it was. and that the houses in India aren't built for cold weather. So his whole family is really suffering. And
No.
I'm sorry to hear that. And I hope your daughter gets better. And then of course it snowed yesterday in Egypt, or no, on the first. It's today the third.
Yeah.
Yeah. So it snowed on Saturday.
Almost.
So, which is
Well,
very
I'm sure
unusual.
your friend. I'm
Go
sure your
ahead.
friend can tell you that this has been happening for about 3 or 4 years. The cooling down of India. It's in
Yeah.
one of the climate zones where that is most affected by the shutdown of the sun. What we just realized this morning here at the ranch is that we reached a record low of -13. I checked the records. The last time that happened, Jay, was the same exact time in the last solar cycle. Exactly 11 years ago, today was the coldest day in Pagosa, which was on the uptick of cycle 24, exactly where we are on cycle 25. So it's like a no-brainer. No one is doing this connection, except people like me, David Dubine, and others that are alternative media. No actual meteorologist, no actual climatologist. It's mind-blowing. And you know why they can't? Because they won't have a job. They'd be fired. There's no one that can have these ideas in the mainstream. Back in the 80s or the early 90s, when I was working on catastrophism, no one wanted to fund my thesis. No one wanted to hear what I had to say. Guess what, Jay? Until I went to a Geological Society of America meeting, I would go up to the Finger Lakes to do a talk. The room would be standing room only during my talk. Everyone wanted to hear what I said because it blew their minds. And they were like, that's exactly what I see. But I can't write it down because I'm not funded for that. And so all these people want to talk to me. They all wanted my thesis. And not a single person would fund me to do any research. Because guess what? What we said was there is no global warming. It's all natural environmental cycles. And we could prove it, but they wouldn't allow us to prove it.
Yeah, I totally understand what you're saying. So you're familiar with the work of Dr. Paul LaViolette, right?
Yes, Paul and I have a very good friendship, and we are more cordial off air than on air.
Yeah, he's a good friend of mine. I actually directed the movie Earth Under Fire based on his book many years ago.
How come we don't hang out, Jay? This sucks, man. You've been like hiding in the shadows.
I have been, but I'm coming out. But so anyway, Paul has has a theory of the intergalactic waves coming through and frying us every so often. I don't know if he's got a 26,000 year cycle, although I think he has entertained the idea of that. And Paul, if you're watching this, get in contact with me. I want to have you on. But I wanted you to talk about your theory of evolution, where the electromagnetic fields drop and different kinds of effects happen. And it was really interesting. Your theory is really, really interesting. It coincides so much with my Hyndee work that I was actually blown away to hear you saying it. Because I mean, you're a scientist. It's one thing to have a mystic say it, but to hear somebody who's got a background in science saying it is just really mind-blowing.
Yeah,
so what drives that?
Well, actually, Jay, this it's not my theory, but it's a whole group of scientists coming together, and my interpretation is the final word because I just took all the pieces and put it together. Now, back in the 70s and the 80s, when I was working at university in the 90s, I believe it was Harvard and Stanford. I'm not quite sure of both universities, but I know Harvard was working on the theory of punctuated equilibria. And this was first posited by Stephen Jay Gould and Niles Eldridge. Both of those scientists came out with the book Punctuated Equilibria, which came off of the paper that they published. I guess it was around 1990. Don't quote me on it, but I'm very close. Now, punctuated equilibria took what every paleontologist knew at the time, including myself, which I was young in the field. But when we look in these books, Jay, there is no missing link. There's no such thing as a missing link. You either are a species or you aren't. And then once you die, after you, there's new species. There's no in-between species. So people started thinking about in between species, and then they started making shit up. Piltdown Man is a great explanation of making shit up, where they simply took a baboon jaw, glued it on top of a Homo sapien head, and said, there it is. And the reason they had to do that and fraud science was because there's no evidence of evolution, zero. So the whole idea of evolution, where you slowly change through time, is bullshit. There is no slow change through time. Guess what, Jay? You and I, when Homo sapien sapien emerged, in my opinion, 5.4 million years ago during the Eocene, that's when we hit Earth. And we've been the same exact people since that time. Nothing has changed. The color of our skin, our height, our thickness, our anaerobic health, maybe based on how we're living, that changes. But I could still procreate with the same hominid 5 million years ago, and we'd make a baby. Yep. So that's what determines the species. And back in the 90s, they were sick of looking at these books. These guys were PhDs, tenured, and they're like, there's no evolution. So we have to use the same word and add another word to explain it. And they said punctuated equilibria, or punctuated evolution. But they left out evolution, notice. It's called punctuated equilibria, which they never said it in the book. They never said there's no evolution and Darwin is wrong, but Darwin's 100% wrong. There's no such thing as evolution. There is only two things happening in the world: adaptation and exaptation. That's it. You either adapt or you evolve because you had some shit you didn't need that works. And that's funny. And our gallbladder is a perfect example of an organ that Homo sapiens once had that is useless now, and it's shriveled away. We're still the same species. We just don't have that organ anymore. So as far as that's concerned, that could be evolution within our species, but that's, in my opinion, just adaptation. And at one point it was exaptation. So if this is true, nothing evolves, and whatever you get is what you get. Well, then how did things change? And that's the question. Well, what they found in the 90s is that things change instantaneously. And we've known this forever in the fossil record. You have all these species that move up through time, and then there's a line. There's literally a layer in the rock where everything above it's different and everything below it's dead. And it's like, what happened? So then they look in that layer and they're like, oh, it's a volcano. We found a K bentonite layer. So that started to explain some things, but they still kept up with the fraud of evolution. There is no such thing. We have events in the fossil record that cause everything to die, and that all new stuff happens on the other side. Now, it's only till recently that we started to put the pieces together. And a paper coming out 2 years ago on late quaternary extinction and evolution overlays the magnetic field with the paleontology. And it does it so eloquently that any human can look at it and say, well, these species are dying out because the magnetic field is rapidly changing. Nothing else is happening, Jay. The magnetic field is changing, and the species in that area all die out. And at the same time, new things emerge. And if you put the pieces together, this is all you have to know. There's only one thing that we know causes mutation in a living human, in a living organism, in a bacteria. The only thing we know that causes mutation is cosmic rays. Period. It's proven. We've proven it. There's tons of papers on it. So if someone says, what causes mutations, Jay? You would say cosmic rays. And someone says, no, what if you go in an X-ray, you can be mutated? And you say, yeah, exactly, cosmic rays, because it's the same high energy particle. So we know this causes mutation. And if you lower the magnetic field on Earth, cosmic rays pour in. So it's a no-brainer. As we see the magnetic field reduce, we see instantaneous species created. And literally what that means is that for Homo sapiens, let's say, in order for us to become a new species during this magnetic excursion, what's going to happen is that two humans will mutate the same way. They'll have a baby, and when that woman gives birth, that baby will fly out of the womb or something crazy. And whatever that is will not be able to mate with us. And that's a new species. So that's the whole idea. It's instantaneous, and it's driven galactically, which is, of course, has to be the answer. The only reason we're on Earth is because of the universe around us.
So you're saying that when the electromagnetic fields drop, that's when all the change happens, right?
Yeah. It seemed, well, when you look at the paper, it seems, so what happens 42 kiloyears ago, 42,000 years ago, Neanderthal went extinct and Cro-Magnon became king. That's us. But we were still around, Jay, before that. So we were around millions of years before that. It just so happens that at this event, the species of Neanderthal, Homo neanderthal, which is not Homo sapien, they couldn't make it. Their DNA wasn't suitable for this shift in the magnetic field. And during the dip, they died off. Either that, they were sickened and they were weakened and we beat them out, we killed them off, or
Right.
other predators ate them up because they were weak. Any of those things could have happened. But here's the interesting thing. There's no other Homo species that popped out during this magnetic excursion. In previous ones, we've had dozens of different hominids like ourselves that popped up. In fact, at one point of 200,000 years ago, there might have been as many as 5 or 6 species running around Earth that were intermingling. So it's interesting. But so Neanderthals go dead 42,000 years ago, but there are other macrofauna that are going dead during little wiggles of the drop down. So what the paper proves is that there are other species that are more localized. See, humans we can adapt to anywhere, we can eat anything, we're omnivores, but certain localized species are easily affected by these magnetic changes. And you can see it in this paper. They lay out about 150 species that are going away and then instantly emerging as the field shifts down. At the very bottom of the down is the end of Neanderthal. So that means that Homo sapiens themselves, ourselves, we could probably be eliminated on one of these drop downs. But we've been through a lot of big ones and it hasn't affected us. So maybe our DNA has adapted to these magnetic excursions. And I believe that this is the key to the story, that Homo sapiens sapien, you and I, Jay, are the telepathic ones. We're the gods. We created the pyramids. We created everything. And only language is new. It's only 5,000-6,000 years old. The reason is because we were at such a high level in vibration. The cosmic rays are what increases our brain capacity, and we actually excel in these times. So 42,000 years ago, when the Neanderthals were going extinct, we were building pyramids, and we were doing it telepathically. And now we are in a very high magnetic field where humans become dumb. And we are, in fact, at the dumbest we could be. And thankfully, in the last 200 years, the magnetic field has epically dropped 20%. And you and I are people that are waking up to the vibration, and we're all, the Akashic record is flowing through us, and all the ancient information is becoming obvious to us. And the further we go along this process, the more that people like you and I will become energized and informed, not by studying the interwebs, just by existing and breathing, tuning into the frequency.
Yeah, I can feel it in my own self. So I know you're right. And a lot of people are talking about it. And guys who've been around as long as I've been around talking about this stuff. I like to joke that that 30 years ago, I'd get invited out of parties because I was telling people things that no one wanted to hear. And now I actually get invited to parties to tell the same thing. So that's how things have changed and shifted in the consciousness, and it is happening, and it's like the pedal to the metal right now. I think that's being driven largely by the COVID, but our magnetic field is dropping, right?
Yeah, and since the Carrington event, a drastic shift in our Earth occurred. Around 1860, the magnetic poles started moving, and the North Pole started moving rapidly in one direction. And it has accelerated for the entire time. In the last 20 years, it has accelerated as much as it has in the last 200 years. So there's an exponential acceleration of the movement of the pole. At the same time, there's an exponential decrease in the magnetic field strength, or the VAM. And this, you can measure this out in your front yard. You can buy a magnetometer for $50 on Amazon, stick it into your soil, and write down the measurement every day and watch it drop. And some areas are dropping faster than others. Some areas are rising, but overall the magnetic field strength in the entire globe is dropping. And this allows weather patterns to shift. The jet stream that we knew in the tight magnetic field with high magnetosphere that ran across the US now goes up into the Arctic and down to the equator. And they're all blaming this on climate change because it's all our fault, Jay. But this has happened before. This happened in the 70s during low magnetic field, which caused the Ice Age scare with Leonard Nimoy. This happened, 60 years before that. It happens regularly, but this time is awesome. The time we're on now is the end of many different cycles. It's the cusp of everything coming together, and it is the sea level fall surface. It is on that cosmic clock. It's the big one. It's the flexure point. It's the Heinrich event. And what a Heinrich event means is that there's going to be something that happens in the near future that all the remaining ice that's up in the north and the south breaks down in like a weekend and all flows to the equator. So there's these huge ice chunks flowing in the ocean. It's going to screw up shipping. No one knows what that event is. A lot of people think it's a comet, but a comet can't come every 12,500 years, for goodness sake. It's not a comet. But whatever the event is may draw in comets because there's often comets associated with it. So I think it's really a shit hit the fan scenario. Maybe the sun, there's an outburst. With the shutdown of the magnetic field, any debris in space can rain down, which is bad news for Earth because of our satellites, for sake. Can you imagine if that's what happens? That when the field goes down, 800,000 satellites re-enter, it would be, 4th of July, to say the least.
Yeah, the cross of Hyndee says that it's a solar outburst. Some kind of solar storm happens periodically. I've heard different explanations for it, tangling up magnetic because the poles of the sun rotate faster than the equator. So you get this entanglement going that has to untangle itself every once in a while. And then you get this gigantic explosion. And it's interesting because when the first time that the knowledge of the cross of Hyndee came out, which was 1957, immediately the dumbs started getting dug all over the United States. It's like somewhere around 1960, they realized that they were in a really precarious situation. And so they started doing all these various things to protect themselves, including probably DIA is probably one of these protection zones. But so you think we're up for a something with the sun? Does that happen when the electromagnetic field drops?
Well, like Paul and I, when we discuss it, we have different points of view. He has one point of view and I have another point of view. And that's fine because our point of views are pointing us towards the truth and forward. Yep. And what I believe is exactly what you were saying in a sense that, okay, if you know the Velikovsky ideas, that the planetary bodies can rapidly move. And you know about the primer fields, and I've watched those videos. When you change the magnetic influence and just sphere balls spinning in a magnetic environment, they will reorient instantaneously into a new position. Same thing is going to happen in our solar system. If we were to just take away Mars and just eliminate it, and just erase it from existence, the rest of the planets would move. They would start moving rapidly, and it would be catastrophic if some of them came into each other's position, which over a period of several years would happen. And then you would have the battle, the Trojan horses, and all the stories of the battle of the gods in the sky. So in my opinion, that happened. And it will happen again. Now, and that simply is if you change the magnetic field. So if you shut down the magnetic field on Earth, then something's going to happen to the sun and other planets. And so there's definitely going to be an effect. And what that effect is anyone's guess. But based on all of historical accounts, and the most impressive is the work of Robert Schoch. And when he suggested 8 years ago that the Rongo was plasma discharge, and then the work that's coming out with Anthony Peratt and the Thunderbolts Project at the same time, I looked at that. My mind was blown. I said, the Rongo is plasma discharge. It's the same as the petroglyphs that are all over the Southwest. these people aren't just inventing a language out of space, but they are. It's coming from space. They're all writing down exactly what they're seeing in the sky. And then that's how language, I guess, developed in Easter Island, based on the whole concept of plasma discharge and cosmic catastrophe. If you're telepathic and you know what's going on, you're going to then have to develop ways to build megaliths, to save someone. And this goes all the way back to the Celtic. The last, man, what is the video? I just put it up on Rumble. But it's like the last pagan. The guy was trained in an order so that a single human, and this is the ancient schools, they trained everyone to know every piece of knowledge known. So if only one person was left, they could rebuild it all. Why would you develop a strategy like that if it hadn't been ongoing for tens, hundreds of thousands of years? Because this was developed about 5,000 years ago when some of the first druids, the last druid, and the way the druids were taught is that the main priests, there were 8 of them, each of them knew everything that was known in the entire world. It took about 20 or 30 years to do the study, but the whole purpose was that when something bad happened, the priests go off into their separate ways and one of them will live, and that one person would be able to rebuild the entire earth with all of the information. And so that's what's going on. That's what the elites are hiding. They know that. They know exactly what's going on, and they will never tell us. That's why we're here.
That's right. Michael Tessarion did a great book about the Druids and how they kept their knowledge, and they're actually the precursors to the Egyptians, and they're super psychic, and they're all alchemists, and really amazing stuff. And yeah, so the event then, by the way, I really like you and Rex going around the American Southwest showing us all those petroglyphs. And I do like the work of Anthony Perrott. And what he did, folks, is he was a plasma physicist at Los Alamos. And then he went and saw some Southwest Indian art one day and realized that it was exactly the same patterns unfolding in his experiments. And then, of course, that made everybody go look at the pictograms in the Southwest. And now we see that they're actually describing some kind of plasma event. And frankly, the American Southwest looks like it had some sort of plasma event, don't you think?
Oh my God, yes. I mean, if there is any proof that there was gigantic lightning bolts from space, it's the Southwest. There's no explanation for desertification at that scale. And it's absolutely mind-boggling. There is so much missing Earth that it hasn't been deposited anywhere. Like when I was a young geologist, my biggest question was, where did all the sediment in the Grand Canyon go? Because all the glacial geologists are saying, oh, that happened during the glacial outwash. It washed out into the Gulf of Mexico. If that had happened, there'd be no Gulf of Mexico. The sediment isn't there. And so no matter how hard you study it, it's gone. So either aliens took it up into space, someone vacuumed it up, or it sublimated during a lightning discharge in a matter of days, weeks, or months. And it was just a lightning bolt that got stuck there, and it scoured right down. And guess what happens after you do that, Jay? A river flows in there. And the Colorado River is less than 10,000 years old. That's what the science says. So if it's less than 10,000 years old, it wasn't caused by glacial outwash because there's no sediment. There has to be another explanation. The only other one is electricity.
Well, it looks like a lightning strike if you fly over it. Yeah. I've flown over about 30,000 feet, and I didn't even know about the electric universe theory or anything. This is 25 years ago. And I remember seeing lightning strikes on golf courses when I was a kid. And I looked out the Grand Canyon and went, man, that looks just like a lightning strike on the ground there. And of course, I didn't know at the time, but no, I agree. And we know that, huge amounts of electricity just completely vaporizes matter. I mean, it's gone. It's just disappeared. It goes into another dimension or something.
And another interesting thing is the only other place we know that cosmic rays come from other than space is lightning. And if we create this type of lightning, space lightning, that's 100 million times bigger than the lightning we witness in a storm, what you're going to get is huge cosmic ray bursts in that region and evolution in that region, localized region. And so that's one of all the pieces start coming together. The fact that you and I know each other, Jay, is not by accident. The fact that I moved next to Rex Bear and I didn't even know I did is not an accident. The fact that I now am friends with Robert Felix and Paul LaViolette over the last decade, and you have been, and now we're just talking, is not an accident. This is literally the universe divining us to go where we're going. I'm only here because I got out of the way. I'm only doing what the universe is telling me to do. And it's putting all these people in my life that should be there. And it's mind blowing. None of this is coincidence. We are ascending into to an end game, in my opinion.
I completely agree. And I'm super optimistic about the world. And everyone that watches the show knows I am. And sometimes we look at dark things, but even that, it's necessary to do in order to live in the light. And that's what we do here. Hey, listen, Diamond, I want to really thank you, man. That was one of the most informative hours I have spent in a long time. And I appreciate it.
I appreciate you having me on. I'll come back anytime.
Right.
And Jay, please come over to my show. We'll chat.
Yeah, let's do it. And love to come to your ranch someday. I've got a ranch too, by the way. And everybody, these are the pyramids. Light the Light Pyramid, Michelle Hood, LIT, the LIGHT, pyramid.com. Look it up. It's good for you. I'm Jay Weidner. You've been watching Reality Check. I want to thank everybody for watching. I hope you got something out of this one because it was a good one. Thank you very much.